when I think about community building, I'm thinking about like how at Happily, I'm thinking about like, how can I help build friendships? How can I help build, sort of build new collaborations?
Hey, Chris, how we doing today, man?
Sam, doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. Very excited for today's special guest. Who we got lined up?
Very special guest today. So super excited to be talking to Sarah Shewey. Sarah helps design and scale communities through her platform Happily, which essentially helps companies across all sectors assemble the best-in-class events teams through a pool of freelancers. What I think is interesting about this network of freelancers is that it's the most diverse one out there. And to kind of add on to it, they produce carbon neutral and zero waste projects, which is pretty amazing to hear, especially today. Prior to starting Happily, Sarah was producer at TEDActive conferences. And in general, I think her really deep entrenched background in events and event marketing will be really interesting to hear her insights on how to build community, especially as we kind of like go through the global pandemic and understand how she's been pivoting in the virtual world. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, no, I think that's all spot on. I mean, I think Happily is a very valuable platform for companies that are really looking to harness the power of virtual events and live events when live events become a frequent thing again. With that said, I think in the episode, she dives into some of the best practices as it pertains to very effective formats for virtual events. I think alludes to Zoom fatigue. I think generally people are completely worn out of just basic live streams, and I think there really needs to be this level of community engagement when you're running virtual events. I think she's able to speak a little bit to some approaches there. So really enjoyed this episode. So really do just want to get into it. So without any further ado, Sarah Shewey.
What's up, Sarah? How's it going today?
It's good. It's evening here. Or I guess it's like early morning.
It's very early morning. You're in Thailand, right?
No, I'm in Taiwan. I'm not in Thailand as I like. I've heard people say it, which like cracks me up every time. I always like want to call Thailand. Taiwan is a little it's an island off the coast of mainland China. And Taiwanese people invented boba, cat cafes, and instant noodles, which I have recently discovered, which I think is amazing. It's awesome here. It's like the Hawaii of Asia, basically, or like China. It's awesome.
Incredible. Well, thanks for joining us, even though it's so early over there on the Brand Community Podcast. I think just to kick things off, we'd love to just hear about Happily and what your journey was to building that company and, how you're kind of creating the community over there.
So Happily is the largest and most diverse network of live and virtual event specialists. I used to tell people like, we're the most diverse, and people would be like, okay, whatever. And then like, just as a few, like maybe a year or two ago, people are starting to like get it like, oh, that's really cool. And I'm like, yeah, that is really cool, because I've been in the event space like for a couple decades now. It's pretty much the only industry I've ever worked inside of. And, there isn't a lot of diversity in the event space, unfortunately. It's a lot of like hiring people who look like you kind of thing. And like, a lot of people like sort of start and like hire their cousins to be like their PAs and stuff, right? So it's like a very like inner culture. And what we've really done at Happily is created a way that just like actually creates teams based on individuals and a network of independents and people who are freelancers or small business owners that like, and sometimes they work for actually large companies. So they're like mostly independents and small business owners who are teaming up on a project per project basis to like create really incredible experiences. And so I think there's like a lot of because of distributed work and remote work, because of the sort of like new like emergence of people being more comfortable with like the idea of sort of like freelancers or people having like multiple careers and not being like a one note kind of person. I think we're in a space now where I think before people used to be really worried about like, oh, like you're not a crew, you haven't like worked together before, right? So now what we found with Happily and with our community is like we're all here working for ourselves. We're here like on the hustle, like just trying to become better. We're like all a bunch of like event nerds that are just like leveling ourselves up just for the love of it, and so like it's been really fun to be like sort of the leader of this an organizer of these like group of organizers and of other like community organizers and event leaders who are just really, I don't know, we're just really so excited and lit up by bringing people together and like changing the world, which sounds super cheesy, but is so true. Like at Happily, we're all about creating fun and woke experiences. So like everything and every client that we work with, they all have some kind of, they all have like really hardcore like values and a value system, a really clear mission. All of our events at Happily are also completely carbon neutral, and they're like waste free. So that's also like pretty. That's also pretty amazing. So we work with a lot of folks who are like activists, people who are really serious about climate change, and as well as like a lot of technologists and people who are like thinking about the future. Because honestly, it's like hard to not be in that kind of a position when you are sort of like working with Happily, because we're really redefining the way that work structures and power structures exist inside the event space.
That's amazing. No, and it sounds like it's able to empower a lot of awesome organizations and event organizers. So it's really a cool product and company. In that vein, I mean, obviously you've seen, and whether it's been events that you've organized personally or events that Happily and the company has enabled, I'm sure you've developed a pretty strong POV when it comes to what makes for a great event, whether it's virtual or live. From your perspective, what are those factors of like great events? I know lots of companies are experimenting with them as a means of growing and nurturing and engaging community, but not everybody does it well. So what do you keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I mean, like community first starts with like shared identity, right? So I think that like when so I like co-founded this thing called TEDActive, and I was like one of the first like 10 or so people at TED after they took their talks online. And actually the one thing that I like designed for is their like, head of programming and head of partnerships in the early days was like, can I design an experience that makes it so that you leave here after your 5 days with us with 3 new best friends? And like, if I felt like if I could like actually get you to a place where you felt like comfortable enough to open up all parts and bring your whole self to an experience and be able to like meet and interact with enough folks that you found those like common grounds. And at TEDActive, we had like people from over 100 countries, right? Like come together. Not everybody like had English as their first language. And so all different generations, et cetera. And so, I think that actually for me, the first place always begins kind of there, is just like, can we create a really super friendly environment? And it's not just about being a friendly environment, but like really actually designing for, can we build and create friendships here? Can we design for that? I think when you are able to do that, like birds of a feather flock together. And that's where that sense of like identity starts, with community. And once you feel like you see yourself inside of a group of other of your peers, then you actually start to invest, right? Then you start to invest your time, your resources, put that back into helping others that, are a part of your group. You have like a desire and a need to earn trust as well as build trust with others. And that's when communities really start to form, when you have like that component of identity, that component of trust, and then you put them in an event experience, you put them in an online space, and that's going to like activate them into all different modes of engagement. I think some of the virtual events, like if we're talking about virtual right now, right? The virtual events that we're doing like runs a gamut. So like I was mentioning, like with like with like all these like activist, experiences is what happens like during and like in the lead up to the election. There was just like a really important, important sort of need, and especially during coronavirus, for people to just connect and to just be seen and to be heard. And so really open spaces has been really important. I think an important thing that we've seen. So not just like talking heads, people talking at you, but also, places that are, that are really like about like, anytime like we start like a webinar or a broadcast or a conference, like where there's like, we're always in Zoom. Actually, we prefer places where you can have your cameras on and not just like, you're not just inside of the chat, right? So we think that like, that's actually a really big difference between sort of like going to any social media platform. Anybody can go onto any YouTube and chat asynchronously, but actually an event is when you're like showing up at a specific like space of time, your camera is on, you are like visibly there. And so when we're there, it was always like, as soon as we can, like, let's get into intros. Let's like into like, let us get into like icebreakers or like experiences that like let you put your camera on, let you like show like who you are like as a person. That's like so important. Especially these days when it's like, you just like feel like you're like in bad TV, like on like most of these like virtual events, right? And then when we're doing like more like sort of like we're doing like a bunch of like corporate like team building work where everybody kind of knows each other. You don't have to like introduce yourself, like honk the horn around the room, but we still see people saying like, how are you showing up today? So allowing people again to bring their whole selves, to the workplace and saying like, I'm tired, my kid was sick all night, like, and just like that, those conversations that, we see like, are happening in and it's sort of like when they're in a meeting or an event, like it helps like sort of change the culture and change what like your daily like Zoom calls might be like. So we're still seeing events as like very special places to sort of shift and move culture forward. But in a lot of the team building, your team experiences that we're designing, we have something called happily hours, and they are like, they're mostly like game shows, and they're like really fun like experiences where we bring in like live music and live performers, or like we're like thinking about 2021 right now, right? So we're bringing in like a collage artist to like come and help you create like a vision board, and like what we found is like really successful with some of the team building experiences is actually getting people more comfortable with technology. We play this one game called like emoji charades, and like a lot of people don't know that you can like actually use emojis like on your desktop, right? And so there's like this surprise and delight experience of just teaching them this like weird little thing that you can like put an emoji up, using your keyboard. And then there's like this whole, like everybody knows charades, and like you act out the emoji and you have to guess it like by using your keyboard. And it's just like this, what we found is just like actually getting people to like lean into the technology, learn a little bit more about those settings and feel more comfortable. That's a part of the goals that like sub goals that we're seeing, and that we bring it happily like to these team building experiences, because like we're going to be in virtual land for at least another 9 months or something like that, right? So there's no need to. There's actually like a really big need to actually get people to embrace the tech a bit more. For some of these like more like broadcast experiences or like conferences, like we try to actually, we're really collaborative, because the whole freelance nature, we sort of like plug in the gaps, right? Where you might not have like competencies, whether that's like UX, UI design, whether that's motion graphics, whether that's speaker curation. Most of the time people like to like curate their own speakers, however, we're always saying like, hey, this is like kind of like a film, right? And when you're watching a film, I don't know, like there's very few movies that I can think of where I'm like looking at the same background and the same person for more than like 10 seconds at a time. That's like a poignant moment when you like hold on someone's face, right? So we're like constantly like trying to like keep it moving. Something has to be like new. We did like sort of a demonstration. We did a TEDx happily, like all in support of countdown and getting to like zero carbon emissions by 2030. And all of our speakers, I think the longest speaker we had was 3 minutes. Right. All of our speakers are like, if you can, 1 minute is preferred, right? Because what we do is we think about like sort of this, what I think of virtual events is it's really a new genre of media. We're not just sort of taking events and like bringing it into the online space. That's kind of like the idea of like, oh, like this works on radio, let's bring this on TV. That's like a total epic fail. So anybody that's like thinking that way, I feel like is a total epic fail. Like really what we're doing is we're kind of combining like a mixture of like what I call like a third of movies, memes, and movement making. And so in the movies, like, experience, what you're doing is you're creating like a story from start to finish. You can use the the 3-act structure to develop a narrative, and a climax point for like what the collective community, story is going to be like for that broadcast or that conference. And then what we're thinking of is like a lot of the reason why I like cut things down to like a minute or 3 minutes or advise on that is because I'm thinking already about like the next thing, like what are you going to click on? Like how memeable is this? Right? Because at the end of the day, like it depends. Like if you're doing something that's like academic and you're learning or you're getting a certification, sure, you're going to need like more time. But if you're really just sort of like trying to like be an inspirational conference or like demonstrate your thought leadership, you don't need to like go super deep like that. Sometimes you just need to like flex on your network and flex on the quantity of ideas, especially again in this virtual environment. If you wanted to go really deep on a subject, do a workshop, right? Like don't do it like in your broadcast. So it's also like, we're advising people like when to go, where in certain places. And that last piece with movement making is really thinking about like, how do you actually like design your call to action inside of that whole like script? And like, what are all of the different ways now in this new media, right? What are all the ways that you can invite people in to co-create the content with you?
That's amazing. I mean, you kind of nailed a lot of like the consensus. I feel like the Zoom fatigue, really plays an effect. It's almost like the way that you describe that. It's like, how can you create a virtual event that's almost kind of like looking at your social feed, snackable, like bite-sized pieces of content, high impact, so on and so forth. In terms of like going back to community building and even like what you've done, to build community over at Happily, one thing that we talk about a lot on the podcast is, the difference between marketing and community building. So I'm wondering if you could kind of talk a little bit about that, like how you're, both marketing Happily to, obviously your internal network of freelancers, but also externally to brands and clients. And then, how you're kind of defining the two different pieces.
Yeah, I mean, like when you think about like if you go back to what I was saying before about community, and it starts with identity and starts with like, can we be friends? That's really where I think the difference is between like community building and marketing. So like with community building, you're really trying to build friendships. If you can build like a lifelong friendship, guess what? That's going to be great marketing for you, because every time, somebody goes, hey, where did you guys become like such great friends? Or they're like, oh, it's such and such's conference, right? That's like basically like the best endorsement, like I think you can think of. So, when I think about community building, I'm thinking about like how at Happily, I'm thinking about like, how can I help build friendships? How can I help build, sort of build new collaborations? One of the things I'm most proud of, which is like, seems kind of counterintuitive, but like one of the things I'm most proud of is like when like our freelancers form teams like on their own and like take on their own client projects, and like they're actually using the Happily like network to build their teams as well, right? And they're doing that, of course, because the quality of the talent is there, and we're the best. I love our team. We're so focused, and we're like really good at what we do, but we also really actually love and enjoy working with each other. We trust each other, and we love that we get to grow with each other. when you're talking about marketing, like, marketing is really like, for me at the end of the day, it's like tied to like, what are you selling? Because like most marketing like rolls up into their metrics, like roll up into like later they grow up into a sale. So marketing is really tied to sort of what product, what message are you trying to put out there to like educate, people about your company or like your new feature, your new service. And that's really different. You're not trying to like make people be like chummy and friends with like a new notification feature, right? You're just trying to like help them understand how that works.
Yeah, no, makes tons of sense. I think that the community you've built has definitely enabled that progress and growth. So I guess the one last question we do like to ask all of our guests, now that it's crazy how time's flying, but if you were to start a new software company or direct-to-consumer product company from scratch, this is definitely a hot seat question, but what would it be, and how would you allocate a $100K marketing budget in order to jumpstart growth?
Well, I feel like I've just done that and everybody's doing that with the pivot to virtual, right? So, but if I had to do it again, like, man, I don't know. I'd probably do something that's like just based more around like achieving world peace, to be honest. Like, I think that's like, there's not enough like startups and companies that are thinking about like the real hard problems, especially like community organizers, or like kind of like thinking about, I don't know, other things. So yeah, I think like the next thing that I would do would be to like create some sort of like social network where people can share their ideas about like what world peace means to them and like what actions or steps that they, share the steps that they're taking to achieve that every day, or even like just share like conversations about their struggle for even thinking that that's even humanly possible in our lifetimes. 100K to like put towards that, like, I don't know, like there's lots of ways to do that. I think like the idea is big enough that I could probably pull in like really big like world leaders, to just get behind it for free. So I probably put it against, this is probably an unpopular opinion. I might change my mind like halfway through. I would definitely A/B test the crap out of it, but I would probably put it like back into ads, like Facebook ads and Instagram ads, like places where like advertising is pretty toxic, and just, be like counterculture voice against capitalism and, all the stuff that's dividing us.
I'm down. Sign me up. I would click that ad any day.
Cool. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, I was like, the idea is good enough. Like, the influencers will jump on it.
Exactly. No, and I think it's also just super important I think we're at an interesting time when it does come to like entrepreneurship, where we can really use entrepreneurship as a mechanism to tackle problems and challenges that account for more than just our bottom line. So I think it's being able to tackle something like that is solving a bigger problem, I think is noble and needed, and just the beauty of what entrepreneurship can do in modern society. So with that said, do really want to thank you for coming on the show today. I think a lot of the work you're up to and the way in which you're empowering companies, event organizers to just create really unique and special experiences is truly incredible. So thank you for taking the time to share some wisdom with us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your platform with me. And I hope that folks will stay in touch with me. Like, find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Shewey, SAGWEY. And yeah, just like reach out. Like, I'd love to hear like and know who your audience is and be friends with y'all too. So thanks.
Likewise.
Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. Take care.
Bye.
Well, there you have it, Sarah Shewey. I think if you haven't already, definitely go check her out. Check out Happily. I think one of my biggest takeaways here was, just whenever you're thinking about virtual events, think about innovative ways in which you can really engage your audience. I think it's not a megaphone. It's not just one-sided live stream. In order for it to really work, in order for you to cut through the noise and create a memorable experience for your audience, there really does need to be this interactive component. So I think she speaks to that. Now you can kind of leverage that in your events. What stood out to you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on that, I loved how she, broke it down, how to engage people through virtual events into 3 different essentially genres, movies, memes, and movement making. So really interesting stuff. And I think, powerful takeaways in terms of like how you kind of create and keep an engaged audience. Lastly, I think too, she really nailed it when she was talking about community and how it starts with shared identity, and to think about community building as building friendships, building collaborations, partnerships, things like that, which is totally converse to marketing, which tends to be very metrics oriented and, sales driven. So, really, really great insights from Sarah today, and hope everybody enjoyed.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks as always for tuning in. We will be back next week. Until then, good luck with those communities, guys.